You were a part of a Mind Change book club, right? Okay, how did you first hear about it? How did that come to be?
So Angela Hooper
Yeah,
presented it to kind of the women
Yeah.
in our church that we go to,
yeah,
and just opened it up for anybody who was interested in reading this book together.
yeah,
And a handful of us kind of jumped in and said, "Yeah, we want
yeah.
to go for this." Um, it was the very first one that we did because I think we did a couple.
Oh, you did a
But,
couple rounds of the book club?
It
We
was
did Mind Change, well, because we did the Mind Change book first,
and then the
Okay.
metanoia
and then
method.
metanoia method.
Gotcha. Okay, so, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just gonna say our first one, I think I felt like was the best one because it was
Really?
intimate and it was a fairly small group that we all were able to really be vulnerable and talk about all the parts.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that first. So, okay, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit and we'll go into it more. Okay, so how did you first hear about the book Mind Change?
So I first heard about it when Angela actually
Yeah.
mentioned having a book club started to have everybody read it together.
Yeah.
This was right at the beginning of the pandemic. So we were
Okay.
all stuck at home. We were all
Yeah.
kind of isolated. And being that we all kind of live in different geographical areas of
Yeah.
Austin, I live way down south.
Yeah.
It was nice because we were going to do this through Zoom. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm not doing anything anyway.
Yeah.
Trapped at home. So why not? Why not read this book? And
Yeah.
I was intrigued by the even just the title, Mind Change.
Yeah.
And then just even reading kind of what it was about a little bit. I was intrigued because, I'm sure a lot of people can relate, and the pandemic just really brought a lot out of a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially if there was any kind of mental health issues going on or just the stress of the pandemic itself.
Totally.
And I know for me and my family, it brought out a lot of stuff. And I always think about that quote. I don't know if it's a quote, but somebody said it's kind of like a toothpaste. You can when it's squeezed, whatever comes out of it, right?
Yeah.
And so I felt like that's kind of what the pandemic did to a lot of us. It
Yeah.
kind of squeezed whatever was already in there that maybe we didn't know what was that was in there.
Yeah.
And so it brought out a lot of things for me, I think, that I didn't realize, and for my family. And so when Mind Change was presented, I thought, okay, this is something I may need. And it was more intriguing to be able to do it with other
people.
people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as you were reading the book, do you remember one of the first aha moments that you had? I remember when I was first getting to it, and I did a lot of I had a lot of physical manifestations of the emotional things, right? So for me, I had a moment where I was like, oh, I really can be well. There actually is a way to deal with stuff. That was the first kind of real spark that made me go, okay, I think I wanna dive in further. Do you remember anything that you read along the way that was this was that aha moment?
So I had a moment.
Yeah.
Because of the book. I think my kind of background is a lot of self-help books I've always kind of read,
Yeah.
self-improvement type stuff. And so I think I guess it would be an aha moment when we created our safe haven. Because I've written down things like in the manifesto before, I've written things down, but the safe haven for me was challenging, but that gave me a breakthrough actually.
Yeah.
In terms of my thinking, and I literally was standing in my kitchen and I felt like I heard a voice that answered a question that I had forever and ever and ever, and that I was trying to figure out the answer to. And so I feel like the safe haven was really, for me, the aha, because, and that's something that I can use now, it's something I can go back to and continually use over and over, and I feel like it kind of gave me that space. It let my mind have a safe place to relax and open up and be able to think about things that maybe I didn't want to think about before, and find answers that were there and I just didn't realize.
Yeah.
So for me, that was kind of part of my,
That's beautiful. I love that. How do you use the safe haven now? Does it like come into play at different times?
Yeah, when anxieties or anger or frustrations, whenever I feel a whole lot of emotions, I can just stop and be like, okay, I'm just looking at this beautiful cove that I have, and I'm just relaxing on the beach.
Yeah.
So it does help, actually, and I've shared with my husband, you need this.
Yeah.
But it helps me kind of versus counting to 10 or something else like that.
Right.
It's a little bit more in depth of, okay, I'm going to calm myself down and take control of the situation and be able to move forward without exploding.
Yeah. And what was it like before you had that tool? Do you remember it all?
Well, I feel like there was probably just a consistent underlying anxiety.
Yeah.
Like there's always something I was anxious about.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah. And literally just before the book club, I had gone on anxiety meds actually for 6 months. Never in my life had I ever needed any kind of medication. I don't know if it was just the pandemic, but that time in my life, like all this anxiety was building up.
Yeah.
And so I actually sought help for it. I only really needed it for 6 months, but then I felt like it was like an answer to be able to come into the book club and find other tools to use to help combat that versus a medication, which, some people definitely, it helps, but I didn't feel like I should need it in a sense.
Yeah.
And I don't now.
That's amazing. Yeah. You were saying, Sabrina, about like the pandemic, right? Like the idea of just so much comes out when you're squeezed.
Right.
How did what you were learning through the book help you deal with what was coming out?
Yeah, well, I will say, okay, so when we talked about aha moments, I will say that when Heather shares her story in the book, she says that there was a pivotal moment for her when she realized that how much power she had.
Yeah.
That if I can make myself this sick, then I can make myself well.
Yeah.
And I think that was an aha moment for me. Because I was also about to get on anxiety and depression meds because of all the stress that the pandemic had caused for me and that all the things it was bringing out.
Yeah.
I had also been suffering from chronic migraines that I had for years, I think since, my early 20s.
Yeah.
And then probably since, I guess, maybe 2015-ish, or actually no, further back than that, I had started suffering from kidney stones.
Okay.
And I was getting let me rephrase that. I was doing kidney stones.
Oh, okay, yes.
I was doing kidney stones once, maybe twice a year.
Wow.
And
that's a lot.
Yeah,
That's a lot of pain.
Yes. And one particular kidney stone actually caused a lot of damage that I was hospitalized for. So I think that what it helped me see, when we talk about the whole idea of being squeezed and all the things that came out, I think what the book helped me do was even just recognize those things.
Yeah.
Right? Because
totally.
Right, in the book, we talk about the difference between victor and victim.
Right.
So I could very much be a victim, right, of all the things that was happening and all the things that were being squeezed out of me and all the things that were happening, even just within my family and in my marriage. And I feel like it was an opportunity to see this as in the eyes of a victor as opposed to a victim.
Yeah.
And obviously I haven't, perfected that. But
it is an ongoing journey and process, certainly.
I can very much fall into the victim role these days, but at least I'm more aware of it, and at least I can recognize when it's happening as opposed to before when I couldn't. And I have the tools now to kind of work through those things and go deeper and dig deeper and try to figure out, what's going on underneath all that. So.
Yeah. Oh, I relate to that too, even in there are times where I go into the victim mentality but the power of just being able to recognize that, it's like it illuminates to me the fact that I do have choice, and even just the mindset coming in of realizing that it's for good reason that I'm doing the things that I'm doing, like that sense of compassion that comes in and instead of it being like, oh, I'm doing the victim mindset, I'm like, oh, there's probably some part of me that needs a little bit more compassion. And as I embrace that, it feels like those moments when I go, like I do a symptom or something that I've done before, feel much more like an invitation now to connect with that like even deeper sense of love. And so I really appreciate you framing it like that and sharing it like that. Yeah. Okay. So all of the stuff being squeezed, but there was still a lot changing when we're talking about that stuff, in being able to have that like victor mindset. How do you like look back on your past now? Has that changed at all since you started doing like some of the self-work and having that kind of community come in?
Do you want
Yeah, I think especially just looking back at things that I was bitter towards, maybe maybe in my upbringing, questions I had, or just even ungrateful because I didn't have a bigger picture. I didn't understand.
Yeah.
And so I think some of the work in understanding that people are just doing the best they can, right, with what they have.
Yeah.
And even beyond that, really being able to let go of things, and letting go of painful memories, letting go of things that just don't help me in my day-to-day anymore. There's no reason for me to just dwell on it.
Right.
And I think, and honestly, all the self-help books I read, like the difference for me in my change was that there were specific tools that helped me to do that, because things pop into my head. Like there's just going to be moments or things that are reminders of the past or something, but to have tools to be able to switch my brain. Oh, let me just think about something completely different right now, or start talking about a different subject. I can completely shut that down and not let it take over my brain and spiral me into some downward like depression or anything. I feel like that has been one of my biggest victories in terms of not letting my mind take control and just bring one little memory of one bad thing, like used to turn into all the negative memories, and all I could remember were all the negative things, and but be able to shut that off before it even gets there, and to know and remind myself that there were plenty of positive things that happened in the past, and to think of those things and to remind myself of those things, and even to be able to help my kids, them not knowing,
what's that like with your kids?
Them have the switch of the mindset, like especially like my daughter, she sometimes has nightmares, and to be able to help her in the middle of the night think about something completely different. Let's, whether it's reading a book or looking at a different picture, so she has a different picture in her mind, and she doesn't see what was in her nightmare, and just feeling like I have tools to help my kids even through challenging situations.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, it is. It's like, it's so practical in application. I think that for me really was one of the big differences. Okay, so how you have your safe haven, right? And when things come up, you have this way of dealing with it. But we also have we really address the stuff that comes up for us, right? Like through interrupting it, but then also like replacing it. Like what has been, do you have anything that's like flipped in your mind that you've done? Or like, maybe there was something that you used to see a certain way, and now you just have this really different image that you hold, or like a different feeling about something.
I can share. I have, so one of the things I think, for me, because in the book, we talk about core beliefs and things that we feel deep about, pretty much like our perspective of ourselves. And I think one of them for me was always that I wasn't worthy of people's time, right? And one of the things I had to go back to, and this is something also I think I learned through this process, was when things would happen, just even in my current day, it usually rooted from something in my childhood.
Right.
And it was hard for me at first to grasp that, right? Because I always felt like, but no, like this is what's going on right now.
Right.
And to really understand through, reading the book that, it's most likely something that roots back to my childhood, something that happened. And so one of the things I had struggled with was just feeling like I'm not worthy of people's time, I'm not worthy to be heard, I'm not worthy, basically. I'm
Yeah.
not important enough. And took me back to just even my childhood, just times in my life when I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel that people in my life at the time weren't taking the time to listen or hear me out.
Yeah.
And I think there was a particular incident that I remember just feeling like there was a time when I felt like I needed to say something, that there was something important, something I needed to say, and the person in my life at that time wasn't really giving me the time of day to hear me out, to listen to me, to hear what I had to say, and I really felt hurt by that, you know, and I think I carried that with me, and so part of, I think, for me, just going back and changing that was to, one, kind of like what Noel said, everyone's doing the best they can.
Right.
So realizing that at that time, that individual was doing the best they could.
Yeah.
That person had, a lot on their plate as well. And I think going back to that moment, with the help of, the community and people who have also been reading the book, helping me just to even go back and visit that moment, that young Sabrina who was sitting there crying and upset because she wanted to be heard and wasn't heard.
Yeah.
And realizing that there was more to that picture than I remembered.
Yeah.
And that I was loved and that I was cared for, but that there was just more going on that probably that child at that time, that little me, couldn't understand. And I think even now as a mother, now that I'm a mother, I've seen so many times in my own, day to day where I can see where there's so much more going on in a certain situation that maybe my kids even don't realize, And so going back and changing that picture did a lot for me. I think it did a lot for me, and changing that core belief that that I am loved, that I am important, that I am worthy of people's time.
Yeah.
So
that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I wanted to ask how you guys have noticed, just kind of building off of what you'd said, I find one of the biggest shifts has been my relationship with myself, like how I feel about myself, and then that ends up translating into my relationships with other people. How have, like you just shared, has there been anything else though where you feel like there's a shift in the way that you like treat yourself or see yourself? Yeah.
I feel like that's always been a battle, but I feel like there's definitely been improvement in terms of just appreciating just the life that I've already lived.
Yeah.
And being able to respect myself for the life that I've lived through, and having children and raising children, and I think even more recently, just learning better habits and wanting to take better care of myself.
Yeah.
And I think, like you start to attract, right?
Right.
What you're wanting. And I think even I feel like this sounds very, very little or small, but even the fact that getting invitations for birthday parties, when maybe back before I thought, I don't have any friends, and then just noticing that, I'm getting invited to somebody's birthday, and that just, it seems like such a little thing, but I know in my mind it's a big thing.
Yeah.
That was back there.
Right.
So I feel like there was a shift, and I don't necessarily know where that happened, because sometimes I feel like things start to evolve. Where I felt like, I do have friends, but I don't know where that shift happened. But I know before I felt like, which I know wasn't true, and it was just something that I was telling myself, but I knew it wasn't true. But I don't have that feeling anymore. So I feel like, it's changed. I don't know that I've done anything specific, or maybe it was the work that I've done. I don't know.
No,
so it's hard to explain some of the changes, but
sometimes it's like we work on, just as our perspective changes, or we work on one little thing, there's all this other stuff that ends up following out. It's like this fruit that's born that we didn't even know would come. And I love that though, because they feel like, it can, on the outside it might seem small, but it's actually like, that's what our lives are built of. Like that's like the really big stuff. And for me, those things were the kinds of stuff that like encouraged me to keep going, where I'm like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. How did I even, like, I know that I've been doing work, but I can't point to it exactly. But now I have this, And it made me want to like play around with it even more and like see what more was possible.
And just like, I have more to put on my gratitude list every
Yes.
day kind of thing.
Oh yeah, how's that been? You guys do like the we talked about the safe haven, but then there's the manifesto and the GPS. What have those been like as practices?
Yeah, I think that for me, they've helped me definitely to be more grateful every day, and those are all just tools I think that help with the day-to-day struggles and the things that are going to constantly come up. And I think something you said earlier was even just like being like gentle on yourself, right? Being, because I think I know I can tend to be hard on myself when I feel like I'm regressing or those types of things. I think just in this walk that we've been doing Mind Change, I feel like I had seen a lot of changes and had seen a lot of good things coming out of practicing my safe haven and working on the manifesto and trying to stay diligent on the GPS daily. And I had seen great things coming from all those things. I had gone almost 3 years without a kidney stone. My migraines had gone away.
Wow.
All these great things, right? And then 2 weeks ago, I was doing kidney stones again.
Yeah.
I keep saying that. I started doing kidney stones again. And it was very easy, I think, in that moment to just be hard on myself and feel like, oh, I'm regressing. But then seeing, I think what the beauty is when we say we're doing.
Yeah.
Because then again, it's that power to undo it and to say, okay, this is my body just speaking to me again and saying, we have more work to do. We have to go deeper.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm getting emotional talking about this because
I'm a little emotional talking about it too, because I'm like, that's it.
Yes,
That's what it's all about.
Because I felt like it's a chance to go deeper in those layers. We have so many layers, and we're constantly daily working on those layers. And every time we undo a layer, there's another layer, and then we undo that layer, and there's another layer. And I think it was very easy, I think, for me to feel like, well, gosh, I did all this work. Why am I doing kidney stones again? But also seeing that, no, like, that's a blessing. Like, that's a blessing. That's a blessing to see that there's deeper work to be done. There's deeper healing to be done. And what great things are going to come from that.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to go deeper. And I know it's going to be hard to kind of go deeper and face more things that are there that I need to work on. But I'm also very encouraged by like the next phase that's coming. So.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think I did enjoy writing out my manifesto. But when we were in our book club, one of the other women talked about how she actually went beyond that and wrote manifestos for each person in her family. And I thought, wow, that's really faithful and bold. And I hadn't done that. But with coming up the new school year and thinking about my son specifically, so I thought, okay, I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
And so actually I think it was more like the beginning of the summer.
Okay.
And I decided to write one out just for him specifically. And like it was kind of really nice, I think, to feel like, okay, I know he's his own person and he's going to live his own life. But I knew that it was in my mind that I needed to work through like my thoughts and my projections of who he was, and even thinking about, wow, I didn't realize every time I describe him to people, the words that I used were not like the most positive words, and I can easily change that, right? And I think I just had to write it out first before I could actually change it in my mind, if that makes sense. Like,
totally.
It was such a habit. It was such a, like, I didn't even think about it, and I even did it today. Thinking about that right now, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I did it again. And I think for me, I realized I really need to work on that piece of how I think the world of him, of course, but when I speak, like the words that come out are not always the most positive. And so writing out the manifesto of what I want to be able to describe him as, and how I actually see him and want to see him, and then how I want other people to see him. It was really encouraging. And I do feel like, because I was working on how I was seeing him and just expecting that others would feel the same way, like he ended up having a really great summer and a great start to his school year. And and so I feel like that's a new area, a new layer for me, right?
Yeah.
To work on. But I feel like I did my manifesto, and I know that can evolve, but I feel like that's taking it to a different level for me and applying it to specifically to somebody else in my family.
Yeah.
And just seeing how by me, I mean, it's really me working on me, but,
Right.
but by working through like my mindset, my thoughts about what words I use and how I think about it, and even practicing like how I'm going to respond when somebody asks me, how's he doing? Like, or how are things going?
Yeah.
I feel like I see the value in even practicing a response to those questions, because my instincts, my responses were so habitual and just based on things from the past, or based on, you know, perceptions from other people, and how I can help change that. And like, he doesn't have any problems with people. Like, it's all in my head. But I think the manifesto has been really helpful for that particular reason, in helping me work through those thoughts. And
that's beautiful. Oh, I love the like specificity, and then, you know, how watching how things change is how we interact with people. It's like that next little piece. I've done some similar things. I'm like, oh yeah, but like taking it to that level, I love the creativity involved in that, and like thinking about, okay, what are all the ways that I can do this? Okay, so as we kind of come into the close, I'm just curious, what has it been like to have kind of created this community for yourselves, of like going through the book and having one another, and, you know, what's that been like?
I think it's been awesome.
So awesome. It's so nice to have somebody you can talk to who knows the language, who doesn't judge you, who understands that we're all working at different levels and different things. And like, even though, and just, it's just nice. Like, you don't even have to say anything.
Yeah, I think it's, I think for our, we read, you know, Mind Change first, we read Metanoia. I actually got to be a part of a third group who started reading Metanoia, and so I decided, why not read it again? It's always like a movie, you know, you watch it again and you realize new things, right? So I read it a second time, and I feel like the level of deepness that we all were able to go to when we talked about our perceived negative experiences and the traumas and the things we went through, it created a bond, I think, that could never be broken. I know, and even some of, like, I don't get to see Noel very much, and I don't get to see some of the other women that were in our group very much, but when I do see them, it's just, there's an instant connection. Yeah. You know, because we went to a level of deepness that I don't even know if I've gone to that level with many people in my life. You know, even my own husband. I think it's just, that's what the book brought out. You know, it brought that out naturally as we were trying to figure out how to heal and figure out how to, you know,
which I don't think any of us could have done on our own.
No.
So I'm really glad that we were able to do it in a group.
Yeah, I will say that. There was, I will say, yes, I agree that there was something different about doing it together. Yeah. And I don't know if it was like the accountability, or if it was just knowing that we weren't alone in this, that we were all going through.
Well, for me, I know it was. I wouldn't have done everything. I mean, the accountability for me, and knowing that somebody else was also going to share their manifesto, so it was a safe place for me to share it. Therefore, I should do it. I should actually do the things that would help the healing, and not just read about them.
I love that, because I think, you know, you're individually, you guys are the ones doing the work, right? Like, no one can do the manifesto for you. No one can change what's going on in your head for you. Like, you're the ones doing the work, but just to know that other people are doing it too. And that, you know, like when you're going into like a newer territory, that there's this sense of like, it's safe because, you know, other people are doing the same thing. Just builds so much more to be able to share in it all. So.
And there was something about sharing also. I think that when we would share what we were learning and the revelations we were having, something about that too was just healing, I think, in a sense. And also, I mean, we were able to all be there to encourage each other, and you can do this, and you know, we're here for you, and we're all here together. And there was sometimes something that like Noel would share, that a revelation she had, I thought, oh yeah, like,
Yeah.
okay, you know, like big moments like that, you know,
Yeah.
that we would have. And yeah, I'm grateful. I'm so grateful that we all
That's
had
beautiful.
each other.
Okay, if you had like one, if you were to share like one of the, like simple positive takeaway that you had from the book and from the experience, what might that be?
I think for me it would be that we are all more powerful than we think,
Mm.
and that everyone's doing the best they can.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Noel, is there anything like kind of, I know there's so much,
Yeah.
it's kind of almost a difficult question to pose, but you know, sometimes there's just that like little like a, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think just that anything can be healed. Like, I just feel like it made me so aware that anything is possible.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah,
Like, if you want to change something in your life, you can change it.
yeah.
And there's tools in this book to help you do that. So that's kind of how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
Ladies, thank you so much for taking the time and for doing this with us. It's been really cool to get to hear your stories and your experiences, and it definitely encourages me along in the work as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.